Paradox Rift felt mid to you, that doesn't mean Pokemon messed up. It means the set wasn't built for you, and that was intentional. Pokemon doesn't release sets randomly, and they're not just throwing darts at a random board hoping one of them sticks to an idea. Every single release has a job. If you collect modern Pokemon, and you've ever wondered why some sets spike and others just sit there, by the end of this video, you'll know how to tell whether a set is meant to excite collectors or to quietly support the game, and why treating them the same is a mistake. Some sets are built to excite collectors. They're emotional, they're chase-driven, they're the sets that make you want to open packs, even if you don't play the game. Other sets are built for competitive players. They're about mechanics, making sure the game actually works the way it's supposed to. And most sets don't live at one extreme or the other. They sit somewhere on a spectrum. You have collector-heavy sets, you have player-heavy sets, and you get hybrid sets that try and do a little bit of both. Pokémon 151 is a great example of that middle ground. It was nostalgic, collectible, and playable enough to keep competitive players happy. Paradox Rift isn't that kind of set. It leans heavily towards the competitive play, and that wasn't an accident. Imagine being part of the design team when Paradox Rift was coming together. They knew exactly what they were doing. The Pokemon choices were thematic, the art direction was strong, but nobody in that room was thinking, yeah, this set's gonna set the market on fire. And that's fine, because competitive players are the foundation of the Pokemon card game. They're the ones showing up to events and the ones keeping the format alive. They're the reason the game doesn't collapse under its own weight. Collectors matter too. They're how people enter into the hobby in the first place. But not every set is supposed to convert new fans or create hype. Some sets exist to keep the system healthy. And once you look at Paradox Rift through that lens, the real question isn't why it felt boring. The real question is, if Pokemon wasn't trying to create hype with the set, what were they trying to fix instead? Even if you never played a single match, this part matters. Because the first real constraint Paradox Rift had was avoiding overwhelming players. Sets that overwhelm players usually spike fast and burn out just as fast. They explode on a release and get solved quickly, and disappear once everyone adjusts and figure out how to beat it. Paradox Rift didn't do that. It added complexity, as well as options for players. And that's the first real sign this set was built with intention. Because if Pokemon wasn't trying to shake the entire game at once, the real question becomes how Paradox Rift managed to improve the experience of playing existing decks without forcing everyone into new decks. Instead of forcing players into brand new decks, Paradox Rift did something much more deliberate. It gave players options. That's where the past and future Pokemon actually matter. Ancient and future weren't just themes for the card arts. They were a design choice meant to split the format without breaking it. Two paths you could take, two ways to build your deck. If you played during the single strike and rapid strike era, this should seem familiar. Ancient and future were basically just the latest iteration of it. Ancient decks leaned into pressure and momentum. Future decks leaned into positioning, timing, and control. You could choose how you wanted to play without being forced into the same engine as everyone else. That's actually why I hopped out of the Pokemon TCG competitively when I was younger. I just hated how you had to play the same deck over and over again just to win. It took out the creativity. This set brought it back. That choice they made is important because instead of telling players this is the deck now, Paradox Rift said, here are some new tools. Decide how you want to go about it. Look at the supporter cards. I'm going to say these all wrong. My apologies. Professor Sada, Professor Turo, the Booster Energy Capsule. None of these are exciting pulls, but they are the oil that make the engine run. They reduce dead turns and frustration without creating must-have chase cards for competitive players. This is the kind of improvement you don't notice immediately. Your deck just feels less fragile, turns feel cleaner, you make fewer mistakes, and that's why these cards rarely become the star. They don't win games or create highlight moments of a match, they just reduce mistakes, which reduces frustration. You'll never point to them and say, that card carried my deck. You just notice that the game feels better when they're in the format. And here's why this matters. When a set spreads its power across options, instead of concentrating it in one place, it starts to feel boring from the outside. Nothing spikes, no explosion in prices everyone's talking about. But for players actually sitting at the tables, the game felt more fun, even though Paradox cards weren't fully capitalized on till later. Once you understand how the power was spread in the set, the market behavior stops being so confusing. Because the market doesn't just react to hype, it reacts to where the value is concentrated. In collector first sets, value piles up fast. One or two cards run away from everything else, prices spike early, and you see content all over the internet. And the rest of the set gets dragged along behind those chase singles. Paradox Rift never did that. There wasn't one card everyone felt forced to own immediately. No emotional lightning rod for everyone to hold on to, so demand didn't feel rushed into one place. It was spread out. That's why SIRs in Paradox Rift behaved the way they did. Instead of one card separating itself, most of them settled into the mid-range. No real winner. No dramatic crash either, just steady, functional demand for people who actually needed or wanted the cards for competitive play. That's what a competitive design set is supposed to look like. Players bought Iron Hands EX, Roaring Moon EX, Iron Valiant, the supporting pieces when they needed them. Not all at once, or in a panic, or because some price chart told them they had to. Collectors opened the set, enjoyed the art, picked their favorites, and moved on at their own pace. There was no pressure forcing everyone into the market the same week to spike prices, so they stayed calmed. Not dead or forgotten, just steady. And that's a very important distinction. When a set concentrates power, the market concentrates value. When a set spreads the power out, the market also spreads the value out. Paradox Rift did the second on purpose, which is why, if you judge it by the same standards of a hype-driven collector set, it looks bad. But if you judge it by what it was designed to be, the market behaved exactly the way it should have. And this is where collectors usually check out mentally, and not because they're wrong. You see, Paradox Rift didn't give collectors a single emotional anchor. There wasn't one card you were supposed to have or chase and build the entire experience around. No mascot doing all the work, no moment where pulling something big was hype. But that doesn't mean collectors didn't enjoy the set. I loved it. A lot of people liked opening Paradox Rift when it released. The art landed, the designs were different. Some of the illustration resin SIRs became personal favorites almost immediately for a lot of collectors. The difference was that Pokémon didn't force that attachment upon you. Collectors weren't pushed into the market all at once. There was no pressure to decide everything in the first 2 weeks. You could open a box, appreciate the cards, and pick the ones you liked, and move on without feeling you missed something critical. Because Pokémon didn't force the attachment, the market didn't panic, collectors weren't punished for waiting. Players weren't punished for buying singles. And that explains this weird conversation around the set, people calling it mid, they call it boring, not because the cards were bad, but because the set didn't demand their attention. That's not a mistake. That's what happens when a set isn't trying to manufacture urgency. This is the part where the strategy becomes obvious. Pokémon manages a system that has to work for decades, not weeks and months, so they rotate the focus. Some sets exist to pull people in, collectors. Other sets exist to keep people playing, the competitors. And occasionally, you get the hybrid set. Collectors matter too, but in a different way. Most people don't enter into the Pokémon card game through competition. They enter in through nostalgia, art, characters, or a single product that pulls them in. That means Pokemon has to keep creating collector-forward moments, but not at the expense of the game itself. So they rotate focus. Some sets pull in people, others keep people playing, while some sets try and do both. Paradox Rift was never meant to be the front door. It was meant to be the structural support of it all. And that's why it matters more after release than during it. The Pokemon that became meaningful long-term aren't always the ones that spike on day one. They're the ones people actually used. The ones tied to games they remembered winning, decks they remember playing. That's how attachment forms. Not through panic or through scarcity, but through repetition and familiarity. Years from now, nobody is going to remember whether Paradox Rift SIR spiked. They're going to remember their decks, the mechanics, and be able to play with the cards and collect them all along. And that's why calling Paradox Rift boring misses the mark. It wasn't designed to impress you immediately. It was designed to hold the game together. Because when Pokemon makes a set feel calm on purpose, sometimes it's just there to build up something else. And once you see that, a lot of modern Pokemon starts making more sense. Paradox Rift wasn't a mistake. It was an engine builder, but an engine is useless without its fuel. And that fuel arrived in the next set, Temporal Forces. That is the topic of our upcoming video, so subscribe and don't miss it. This has been Real Collector Talk. No hype, no nonsense. My name is Elias from Bulba Cards. I will see you guys here next time.